It is no secret in American politics that fundraising and the need for it while you're in office drives who gets attention, what legislation gets drafted and supported through the process to signature, and how much funding gets appropriated behind those laws. But does it inherently create a largely hypocritical elected official who will support policies they say they're adamantly opposed to? Well, of course it does. And here's an example on this show today that we'll see that's funded by pro-abortion lobbyist who brags about his pro-life credentials on his own campaign website. Strap in. This is the Rob Maness Show. Republican Texas Congressman Kevin Brady's campaign website advertises his endorsements by pro-life groups, a key component and badge of honor for a candidate seeking votes from conservative Republicans. Strangely, Brady's website doesn't mention the lobbying firm that funds pro-abortion candidates like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, and has given his campaign over $17,000. When asked about this development, his opponent said, quote, "You have to ask yourself, why would Brady accept campaign contributions from a lobbying firm who's funded by a fugitive from the law? And secondly, why would he accept campaign contributions indirectly from a law firm that regularly sues the Trump administration? And more importantly, for a guy who's always touting his right to life credentials, apparently they don't apply when it comes to accepting campaign contributions from a decidedly pro-abortion and anti-Second Amendment lobbying firm," end quote. That's Brady's GOP primary opponent, Kirk Osborne, when he was contacted. Of course, this kind of hypocrisy is not unusual for either party's establishment candidates like Brady. After all, each time an omnibus budget funding resolution is passed, abortion factory Planned Parenthood never fails to get its share of the tax revenue pie, even when the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives. Speaking of budgets, has anyone in power noticed we've added over $1 trillion to the national debt under a Republican president and Senate since the Democrats lost those offices? For part of the time since the Republican president was elected, he had a completely Republican Congress and the budget wasn't brought under control. Why is that? Because American voters continue to buy the lies that a political party exists which fights for limiting government and spending. Sadly, establishment Republicans repeatedly prove that they really aren't different from the establishment Democrats. It is time we start voting men and women into office for more reasons than the letter behind their name on the ballot. Our example Congressman, Mr. Brady, has earned an F Liberty score with Conservative Review. According to their website, Brady earned his F rating by consistently voting for spending measures that did not fully defund government-sponsored funding to abortion clinics and his non-conservative voting record. Is this what limited government and liberty voters really want from their elected officials? No. So how do we regain control of our government and elect principled men and women to office who do what they say they'll do when asking for our votes? Well, our guest, David Thomas Roberts, an entrepreneur, inventor, and author who founded his own publishing firm, Defiance Press, is a conservative, liberty-minded Texan and joins me to discuss his reporting on these important issues. David Thomas Roberts, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me. You're one of my favorites, so I appreciate you having me on.
Well, it's good to hear from a Texan, and I want to dive right into this because I've been following one of the poor examples of party establishment politicians that I want to talk to you about because you did a great article on him, and just really dive into this guy because he stands to me as the epitome of the establishment party power hypocrisy that happens around here, and that's this guy named Kevin Brady, congressman from Texas. What is the deal with this guy? I read your article, and he's always really been a hypocrite. I knew about him long before somebody sent me the link to the Defiance Press article a couple of weeks ago. And the man is surviving as a conservative Republican over and over. So, what's the background on that? And what is he up
Well,
to with this Planned Parenthood stuff?
well, gosh, there's so many places to go with this. I'll just start with this. So he is actually my congressman from the 8th Congressional District of Texas, and this district is actually the fourth most conservative district in the U.S. And so there's always been this strange. He's been there for 24 years. He's never held a job outside the Chamber of Commerce or a government job, and or never made a payroll. And I would term him. That's where I coined the phrase "swamp Republicans" because they're hiding out in plain sight on Trump's bandwagon, and that's what the article you referred to is about. But we just keep sending him to Washington every cycle, and it makes no sense. Part of it is he hasn't had a good candidate run against him until recently. But even then, I mean, he's got the largesse of millions of dollars in campaign funds and the establishment behind him and so forth. But he is, along with Cornyn out of Texas and many others that you could put in the same category, establishment swamp Republicans who all of a sudden mysteriously have found the light with Donald Trump, who wasn't on their bandwagon, wasn't on Trump's bandwagon during the primary or before he was elected. Now all of a sudden it's in every campaign poster they put out with their likeness along with President Trump.
Yeah, don't be surprised when Trump gives him an endorsement and everything.
Oh, he
So,
has. And so what we do with Brady is take him back, and Conservative Review has a great scorecard, and they've ranked him as an F for many years. He's got the same ranking as Sheila Jackson Lee, and which is another Texas favorite. But
yeah.
so every time we do that, every time we bring up his voting record, because he's got a miserable conservative voting record, their answer is, well, Trump endorsed him. Or here's a picture of him with Trump, or that he wrote the Tax Act, which is a totally different subject altogether. I always compare that, Rob, to him taking credit for Trump's Tax Act. It's like Babe Ruth's bat boy claiming his home run record,
So, before we get into that, the limited government aspect of this guy, the Planned Parenthood thing, and the abortion law firm, and those kind of things, $17,000 in donations from these folks. That's
Well,
amazing that he can get away with that.
he does, and he's not the only one that gets away with that, because what happens is, all right, let's just go back on his voting record for a minute, because Brady has voted for every omnibus, every cromnibus, TARP, every continuing resolution. Brady is like a lot of these other swamp Republicans, where he's never met a spending bill that he didn't like, and a lot of these things would continue to fund abortions through Planned Parenthood, and yet he touts his right to life credentials, and we got a lot of these right to life organizations that need to be questioned what their vetting process is before they endorse these candidates. But then we dug a little deeper, and I went on to Open Secrets and started digging through his campaign finances, find out that Loretta Lynch's law firm, which is Paul Weiss and then 20 other names behind it, opened a lobbying arm which was funded. Now this is you can't make this stuff up. It's funded by a guy named Carlos Ghosn, who, if you don't know who that is, was a CEO of Nissan Motors in Japan. Accused him of bilking $90-something million out of the company for his own benefit. He was under indictment. He jumped bail in Japan. He went to, I think it was Lebanon. Yeah, he's in Lebanon, where they won't extradite him. That guy gave $1 million to Paul Weiss's lobbying firm, that his 6 lobbyists did it, who 93% of their money goes to Democrats and mostly to pro-abortion candidates, anti-Second Amendment candidates. In fact, the Paul Weiss firm has sued the Trump administration over illegal alien causes. They've also sued the gun manufacturers to be responsible for gun violence victims. And so they're no friend of conservatives whatsoever. And yet they give Brady $17,700. And we challenge Brady to refute that campaign donation and to give it back. Now, I will say he's not the only Republican, but there's only a few Republicans that they gave it to. Okay. And two of them are from my state, Senator John Cornyn and Brady. And so I don't know how you can juxtapose that with his right to life credentials, but to me it's fake, and he's hiding behind it. And you know, if you just took his voting record on the spending bills that continue to fund those things, how in the world can he be considered a right to lifer?
Well, it's like how in the world can the Republican Party be considered the party of limited government and wise spending in government when since this president and I like President Trump's policy approaches so far for most of them. So folks shouldn't take this the wrong way, but with this president, he's grown the national debt over $1 trillion, and it was already $22 trillion. Obama put 10 trillion of that on there, and nobody is saying a word. And it just highlights like what you're talking about with the pro-life issue, which is even more egregious, and the anti-gun issue, which is even more egregious. You would think that with a political office holder like this on the Republican side, anyway, with this track record, this is like the triple header spending and anti-gun and anti-life, that no Republican should be able to survive like that. But there are those, and I'm not surprised to hear there's three. Actually, I'm a little surprised to hear there aren't more, because the establishment politicians, David, as I've learned over these past 10 years, that it doesn't matter really what's behind their names as far as D or R. They're all about keeping the establishment in power, from what I can see.
Well, with Brady, it's even a joke. I mean, I think he spoke at his first Tea Party event this year that I'm aware of. He's been anti-Tea Party. He got to that office because he was led around by the nose by John Boehner and Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan put him in the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee before Trump was elected. So here's the thing about they're all saying all his proponents are saying how the Tax Act, the major tax reform is Brady. He wrote it, and he should get a lot of credit for it. To me, tax reform isn't adjusting the marginal tax rates. Listen, I'll be the first one to tell you, I love the adjustment of the tax rates. I think I'll benefit from them. I think most of America has benefited from them. But let's not confuse that with tax reform. First of all, Brady, if he did take credit for it, he did make the rates permanent so they could change. They're going to expire in 2025. And the next administration, if it's not Trump, can come through and undo that. And we're still dealing with the IRS. So, when they tell me this was he's responsible for tax reform, changing marginal tax rates is not tax reform. Getting rid of the IRS and changing how we derive income to run the government is tax reform. This isn't it.
Yeah, that wasn't tax reform. That was tax cutting, which I'm always for that. Any way we can get it done, I'm going to support that, because once again, I mean, the federal government's got a record year of revenue collection, like it does almost every year, even with the tax cutting.
But Trump,
his bill was not a tax reform bill.
Every quarter is a new record revenue, and it's still not enough. I mean, the insatiable appetite of the government. Yeah. And even, let's face it, even when the Republicans had both houses, they didn't kill Obamacare. They didn't, they didn't cut deficit spending. They haven't been able to come up with budgets. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what the end point is about kicking the can down the road. But Brady's been part and parcel of that whole process. He's been part of the swamp Republicans that have helped create this mess. And even when the Republicans had the power to do something about it, they can't seem to get it done. They're impotent.
Yeah, and it was probably because of the hand-wringing in the establishment wing of the party going, oh, if you do that, we're going to lose the legislature. Well, they lost the House anyway because they were dithering and not doing what we promised that we would do when we took control of the House, Senate, and the presidency. I looked at it for years. Well, we got to have the House. Let's keep it. Then the Senate. And then the presidency, eventually we got all three and we didn't get it done, did we?
No, and the problem is, Rob, as you know, these moderate milk toast Republicans, they think that if they move to the center, they're going to be better positioned to win these elections. And we know, you and I, and most of us know that when they move to the center, they lose. And that's how we've had this swelling deficit, this swelling debt, and it just never ends. And Republicans are just as much to blame. But I'm getting castigated. I'm sure you are too right now, of speaking out against any Republican because their claim is this is the most unified the Republican Party's been in years, and that may be true because I'm seeing people cover each other that I've never seen cover each other. But you still got to call it out for what it is, and this ridiculous spending is got us. It's going to come back to haunt us somewhere. It may not be in the short term, but my kids, my grandkids, all of ours are going to suffer for it.
Yeah, those establishment folks, they conveniently leave out the part about the unity pieces that it's Donald Trump's policies and his election that have helped unify the party. It's not because I agree with any of the establishment people. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see Trump do more and take a stronger stance against these establishment staffers and elected officials and start backing people that'll go against the establishment. But I understand where he's got to be too. He's got a political establishment that he's got to force to come with him. Isn't that right?
That is right. But I keep telling people, I said, and I tell this to every elected official and I don't even like to call them elected officials. I call them elected employees because they work for us. They're supposed to work for us.
Yeah.
But when you look at guys like Brady, Brady, I think it's like 86% of Brady's money comes from out of district. And most of that comes from D.C. and New York. So how is he representing his constituents here? These guys are beholden to lobby firms. Brady's got a lot of health care and big pharma money, and so you wonder how that what kind of light that casts on him when it comes to really passing Obamacare. So there's just so many things here. I mean, Brady's the poster child for term limits. If we ever needed term limits, it's people like him. If it's good enough for a president, why isn't it good enough for a congressman or for a senator?
I completely agree on the term limits piece of it. The naysayers on that always say, well, you have elections, but, and we want to remove the guy, but the money tends to be able to overcome the opponent's messages with their message, which is always borderline lies and just misinformation about what they really are. I'm sure with this guy, they touted tax cuts that he wrote and passed for the Trump administration, and that's about it, because that's all he's got to stand on, and even that wasn't that good. So how do we, he's got an opponent, right? He's got a really strong opponent this time on the Republican side.
He's the opponent, but he's not funded nearly to what Brady is, and so you're already starting with in the back of the pack because of that. He got kind of a late start. I would have liked to seen him get started sooner, but he's Tea Party conservative. His name's Kirk Osborne. He'd make a great congressman. He's already committed to serving no more than 2 terms if he gets elected. And I think if you go, Rob, you go back to our founders, and I read a lot about the founders, and it was never their intent for a job in politics to be an elected office, for that to be a full-time career path move for anybody. It was a citizen-led government it's kind of like when you go serve the military. You go serve your time, then you go home. Okay. And these guys like these swamp Republicans like Brady and Corden and others guys who've been in there, who's never made a payroll, in Brady's case, never had a job in private industry. Enough is enough. And, we have to overcome the money that's in politics. I don't know how you do it. We just have to continue to fight every day.
You're exactly right, David. So what about other races? I mean, this is a big year for really conservatism. I believe it could be. There are just a whole bunch of veterans running that are real conservatives, liberty-minded veterans. I'm monitoring that very closely, being a veteran myself, and want to see folks that really believe in America, because I see the Bernie movement as not just an affront to American values, but as a real threat to the republic as we know it. you know, it's under threat anyway with all the big government largesse and spending and the money in politics and those kind of things. But to actually put a socialist, self-described socialist, I believe he's really a communist, into the Oval Office is kind of scary, isn't it?
Well, I preach all the time about, this is back in 2016, although everybody, Trump was a big story. I actually didn't think that was the biggest story. I thought the fact that Bernie had gotten 22 million votes in it as an avowed Democratic socialist in the Democratic primary was a bigger story. And here it is. I don't know if they'll steal it from him or not, but he's positioned to win the Democratic nomination, and it's extremely dangerous for the country. But this is the chickens coming home to roost, so to speak. And what, 50 years of liberal education, taking God out of the schools, taking prayer out of the schools, letting liberals teach their version of history. I mean, our history is being destroyed left and right. American heroes are being castigated and thrown out of school books. I mean, so we've basically raised a generation that is open to socialism because in their mind, and I've talked to a lot of them, Rob, in their mind, for somehow they've got the twisted notion that socialism means equality. And and that's what we're fighting. But you're seeing it, and I think it's going to continue to grow, and we got to fight it tooth and nail at every step.
Yeah, it means equality, all right. Equality in poverty, equality in millions of deaths that system of government brought to the world in the 20th century and continues to bring to the world. All you have to do is look at Venezuela and Cuba and the vestiges of that and communism in China and those kind of areas, and you realize that it is the wrong way to go, and we have to really fight over it. So if you were king for the day, David, how would you overcome this problem? We talked about term limits. What other ideas can we share with our folks out there about how can we turn this around from a political office holder perspective and get the right kind of folks in these seats to do the
I
right
think
thing for all of us?
one of the key questions you got to ask candidates at every level is where they stand on school vouchers, because parents need a choice to send them to public schools that are teaching this stuff, or try to find some other school that actually teaches some conservative principles, or maybe even a parochial school where you have some Christian or some kind of Judeo-Christian message going on, because the public schools aren't doing it. Public schools are one of the reasons that we're here. So school vouchers to me is really important. That's something I ask every candidate about, and where they stand on it. And that's where we start, because I think that's what's led us to our problem. And then the other thing is, I think that because capitalism is trashed so much, we need to get back to really promoting and actually celebrating free markets, free enterprise, and teaching kids not to go get an education to go get a job, but to go get an education so that they can start their own business, and start to put folks up on a pedestal that have created their own businesses. And it doesn't have to be the next big thing. Somebody invented the next iPhone. The guy that starts a dry cleaners down the street and employs 8 people, he or she should be celebrated. And I think that we got to get back to entrepreneurship. That's the only way to get back to free enterprise being taught in schools, and to celebrate it.
Well, I appreciate those answers, and so tell my viewers about your publishing house. And I know you got a book sitting behind you. You've got a new book out, so fill us in on your new book and how folks can find Defiance Press Publishing, David.
Well, I was asked to write a book, Rob, on because I've had my tax attorney, which is probably the most renowned tax attorney in the country, called me the most audited man in America. And believe me, that's not a title anybody wants, okay? But I went through my issues with the IRS, and so I have a real keen knowledge of the IRS and how they work, and some of the tactics and things that they use, and all the pain and suffering that they put us through. And this is not, I'm not an uncommon story. It happens. So I was going to write a book on that experience, but the more I dug into it, the more I figured out that, hey, this is not what the founders intended. How did we get here? Not so much that this is where we're at now, but how in the world did we get here? And so I walk readers through how we, the progressive age, which is 1900 to 1920, I do think we're going through that again, because a lot of things that you heard in that era were, the income inequality, those type of things, capitalism's bad, you were hearing in that period, which led to a lot of bad things, like the 16th Amendment being passed, and the Federal Reserve being passed, and the election of senators that go to the general populace instead of to the state legislatures. A lot of things, bad things happen at that period, and history does repeat itself, and you're hearing the same things again. So I will tell you, your readers will be mad after they read this book, because you'll see how much money went out to get paid in illegal aliens for EITC credits, thousands, billions of dollars. And Congress knows about it. Even Kevin Brady knew about it when he's House and Ways chairman, and still did nothing about it. So that's the book. That came out actually last year. It was Rob Bernhoff, who is a tax attorney, is part of the book, and it shows you how much money, you can't be a conscientious objector when it comes to paying taxes in the U.S. So, if you don't like your money going to Planned Parenthood or going to Muslim countries in Africa, you're going to be mad after you read this book and find out where money really goes.
Well, a lot of times that's how we can energize the American people to get stuff done right and get the right change to happen in our government. So I hope a lot of folks go there. Appreciate you coming on the show today, David. We'll get the word out to everybody and share this thing when we get it published, and hopefully we can get a real American values Republican into that seat where your congressman currently
We're
is.
trying, and I will never give up, Rob. So I appreciate it. So our Defiance Press and Publishing is the website. I'm very active on Twitter at Texas Author on Twitter. And Rob, thanks so much for having me. You're a true American patriot, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, and look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mr. Roberts for joining us today for our spirited discussion and answering our questions about how in the heck can we get people in office that aren't primarily for keeping their establishment political parties in power, but are primarily working for us on behalf of the United States of America and keeping America's values. Until next week, I'll see you later. This is the Rob Maness Show.